Well, hello, Atlanta. This is Daniel Faggella joining you from Boston. I'm looking forward to being able to help kick off this event. I wish I could be there with you in person. The last time I was in Atlanta, Bob and Tracy were just the best possible guests in terms of Southern hospitality, and I think I was extremely well fed. I believe I had steak and ice cream before getting on stage, which was fantastic. And I imagine you guys are enjoying yourselves out there as well. I wish I could be with you. What I wanted to do was tee off the event with a few critical ideas to get the ball rolling when it comes to AI and ethics in business. A lot of our work at Emerge, whether we're working with a global pharmaceutical company on a go-to-market strategy or we're doing research for the World Bank, is going to eventually evolve talking to high-level people in the public or private sector about putting AI in action. Inevitably, ethics is part of the conversation in terms of transparency, in terms of accountability. And we're going to go over some of those kind of teed up topics that come up most frequently with executive audiences and in the C-suite. And so what I want to do is bring up two of those topics, have one quick takeaway point for making the most of the event, and wrap things up. So we're going to hop right into it. So the first ethical theme that we can cover here is transparency. At the high level and in actually bringing AI to life within an enterprise, transparency and accountability are the two ethical considerations that come up most frequently. Often it's considered that there's a business process or a function within a business that either needs to be completely transparent or it can be completely intransparent. When in fact, we think that it happens to be more productive to think about businesses in terms of phases. So I'm going to give a quick analogy here. So we might think about the process of medical diagnostics. Let's just say we have a doctor who's dealing with patients. One system in the process of diagnosing and maybe recommending treatments to patients would be pulling up relevant medical literature. We might be dealing with cases that require us to sort of have some background and understand maybe the interaction between two disease conditions or a certain genetic condition and a potential disease of some kind. And we may want to sort of unearth some of the medical literature that could give us some context here. That phase of the diagnostic process may or may not need to be transparent. If we're getting medical literature in front of us that we think might be useful, and it's better than just combing it randomly or searching for random keywords, then maybe that doesn't need to be a transparent process. We're just informing our own mind. It's doing a better job than maybe our own aimless searches might have done. And so maybe we don't need transparency there. Somewhere in the middle ground might be something like computer vision. If we're looking at x-rays or we're looking at MRIs with some kind of AI-enabled system, we may or may not, depending on the situation, require that we absolutely know why this particular computer vision model understands or knows or claims to state that this might be cancer or that this might be a fracture, for example. We may not need transparency there because, again, as a doctor, if our only alternative was just to look at the image and make our own intuition, this is simply a layer on top of our intuition. It's not making a call. It's simply calling attention to something that we might want to pay attention to in the first place. And a third phase here might be recommending a course of treatment. If we have a machine that recommends a course of treatment, we may in that case absolutely demand transparency. We may need to know what factors, genetic, disease-wise, health history, whatever the case may be, has led the machine to make the recommendation that it's made. So in this case, in transparency, we've thought through the phases of what diagnosis means, as opposed to looking at diagnosis as somewhere where we either need transparency or don't need transparency. Often, the two do end up going together well if you can figure out what phases of the process require it. So thinking through business phases is often a way where we can make AI fit its way into a process, even if there are some barriers to get there in the first place. Next up is the idea of accountability. Again, is a human making the decision here or is a machine making the decision here? Who ultimately is going to be accountable? Who's pulling the trigger, so to speak? And often this is considered to be, when we talk about this in the C-suite, either humans need to control business function X, or, well, machines can control business function Y, when in fact it's more nuanced. In accountability, we often think through the lens of risk as opposed to business phases, although we could do both, but I'll talk about risk as we haven't yet. Risk might be, again, the level of risk related to this particular kind of decision. So let's say we're talking about approving loans, for example. As in the case of transparency, we might have instances that are gray areas. We may have instances where accountability clearly needs to be with humans, and other areas where it can be pretty clearly placed in the hands of machines. So, for example, we might say that if we are putting loan applications in front of a loan officer, and we have a computer system that is coaxing out what kind of anomalies have been detected and what sorts of things the human might want to inspect when it comes to these loan applications. That may be something where accountability can be with the machine. The machine is not making an important decision here. The risk level in this case, we're thinking through risk, is very low. A human is going to be randomly coaxing through various data points. If we can have a machine call out the data points that seem to be anomalies, that seem to be different, we may or may not really care that it's a computer doing that. So accountability may not end up being a big deal. There may be gray areas. So let's think about a loan application that a computer system, a well-trained computer system that's been tested, an AI system of some kind, has detected that it's a small loan. Let's say it's tens of thousands. And it's a 95% failure rate. So the computer system believes that this is not going to be a loan that we're going to approve. We may or may not require that a human ultimately sign off on every minuscule loan with a very high confidence rate from the machine. We may just not need a human to inspect that, depending on our own business needs. So in terms of risk, the risk of letting that go might end up being low enough where we're okay to let them go. We may only need to inspect, let's say, 1 out of 50 of those cases where confidence is that high. So that'll be a business call, but as you can see, it's a little bit muddled. It's not quite black and white. There might be cases where we want to draw the black and white line. So for example, maybe any loan application for $500,000 or more needs to absolutely be signed off by a human loan approver of some kind before it makes its way along in the process. That may be a distinction that we firmly want to draw, and that's a case where, again, accountability can vary throughout a business process based on the levels of risk of what we're working on. So hopefully these two lenses are useful. Again, in the enterprise world, at a high level, in terms of applying AI to existing business processes, transparency and accountability are the two big ones, and thinking through phases and thinking through levels of risk is often easier than black and white thinking when it comes to finding a way to find a place where AI can be productive in a business process. The last point I wanted to bring to bear is specifically around AI ethics events. One of the benefits of spending a good amount of time in the C-suite is that we're just having pragmatic conversations. There's no song and dance. We're explicitly focusing on solving business problems, and I think events like the one that you're at now are an excellent opportunity to do just that and to do a much more wider networking, which is going to be excellent for this event in Atlanta. The downside potentially at some AI ethics events, and I've seen this everywhere I've spoken about artificial intelligence in probably the last 8 months, whether it's an AI ethics event or not, they all involve some thread of that, whether it's at United Nations headquarters or Harvard University. There's a dynamic that shuts down, I think, fruitful conversation around AI ethics. Generally speaking, when we're solving a business problem, we're trying to improve business outcomes or improve employees' or users' lives, we have to come up with a lot of ideas. We have to generate many ideas around where AI might find a home to improve our efficiencies, optimize our processes. And something that shuts that down is a particular kind of posturing when it comes to AI ethics. The hard part about AI ethics is asking, how can we navigate from where we are to finding where AI can apply itself where we're not breaking the law, we're not breaking our own values, and we are driving value for the company and for our customers. That's hard. That's very hard work. What's not hard work is to act indignantly at any kind of AI idea that seems, that could be in some way interpreted to be immoral. And not to do so in a way that we weave around it to achieve a business outcome, but to do so in a way that rustles and kind of preens our moral feathers and gives us a certain kind of luster. So there's two kinds of ethical insertions into conversation, sort of clashes that can come up when we're talking about ethics. One could be frankly addressing an ethical concern so that we can navigate through it, so that we can figure out how to move around it, so that we can figure out how to achieve that outcome, improving business outcomes, improving customers' lives, the hard work of really thinking through ethical problems. The other reason to bring up an ethical problem is simply to state frankly how moral we are, how concerned for others we are. The safest way to do that is not to solve the problem, but simply to frankly bring up a concern and ring an alarm in a way that maybe is even accusatory of those who are bold enough, selfish enough to think of that AI idea in the first place. And this is the enemy of coming up with good business ideas. We have to brainstorm, we have to share ideas. So if you see that kind of what Emerson would call parlor soldiers, that sort of preening of morality without actually stepping into the ring and making a firm judgment call about how this could improve a business process or improve lives, be wary of that. And I hope you see as little of that as possible at this event. When people bring up ethical concerns, in order to work around them, in order to discuss them thoroughly and find a way to achieve outcomes that are worthwhile, that is what events like this are all about. So I hope some of these ideas will prove themselves to be useful. I hope you enjoy the sessions, you enjoy the networking, and hopefully you enjoy the steak and the ice cream as much as I did the last time I was there. Hopefully next time I'll get to catch you down there in ATL myself. But until then, signing off, that's all I got for time.